Hello, I'm Brian Critchell and I'm here today with Kevin leGrand, who's President of the Society of Pension Consultants and also Principal and Head of Technical Services for Buck Consultants. Kevin, welcome, thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Most commentators now agree that we're unlikely to turn the adult population into investment experts. I'm personally quite disappointed that some of the offerings that are coming forward in the DC world in particular for those scheme members who are not investment experts just appear just as complicated and baffling to explain to people. Target date funds, you know, this sort of thing, and absolute return funds, etc. So you name it, we can put a label on it.
Yes.
But what should we be doing if we're going to have some complexity to make the product work in terms of education? How far should employers and trustees go in terms of financial education? We shouldn't all leave it to the government to put into school, surely.
No, absolutely not. And of course that would only address those people who are at school now and younger. We've got a definite problem at the moment with the adult working population, and we need to do something for them. And I think it's particularly important for those who, perhaps of my generation, perhaps yours as well,
yes.
who when we started out working life, we all became members of probably fairly generous final salary schemes. Even though we were in the business, we probably didn't think too much about our own pension arrangements. We just took it for granted that somebody was looking after it for us. And that's probably replicated across our generation entirely. Now, scroll forward 20 years or so, and all those people have now been, or the majority of them, kicked out of their final salary schemes are now in DC, and they've had no previous experience or expertise that they've built up in relation to running a pension scheme. And in many cases, they've got not the first idea about how much it costs even to secure a pension. So we can't expect overnight that suddenly they'll all become experts. And I personally think that there will always be what I think is probably a sizable proportion of the population who will never be experts in that sense. And so therefore, whilst I'm not saying in any way that we should give up on education, that's very valuable, that's very important, and if we are asking people to take decisions about their own future and so on, then we've got to give them the tools, got to help them acquire the knowledge to at least understand what's going on, even if they're only partly involved, they choose to be only partly involved in the decision-making process. But I do think that, therefore, you know, the concentration, we ought to accept that now when we're looking at using up limited resources and where we put those resources. Do we concentrate on education, or do we concentrate on assistance and advice processes and so on, perhaps, or scheme designs or anything like that actually helps take away some of the personal decision-making requirements from people? That there should be a balance between the two. We shouldn't just concentrate on one or the other. And certainly at the moment, it seems to me that the focus has got to be on helping current generations in work, particularly those of more advanced ages, deal with the arrangements that they're likely to be faced with on a personal basis. Now, that's a combination of, as you say, trying to simplify the design of the schemes, trying to certainly simplifying the language that we use. So when we're looking to allocate scarce resources at the moment, we need to think about where we would make best use of those resources in terms of dealing with problems that we're facing today. And I think that the biggest challenge we face today is in respect of the slightly older workforce, if you like, who are actually in need of help and assistance now. How can we help them? Well, I think clearly, as you've pointed out before this afternoon, that simplification of scheme design is certainly an area we need to work on. We also need to work on clearer communication, particularly around language and so on. And I know that certainly in the pensions world, we are quite rightly at times accused of having our own language and and we need to try to get away from that. But also the investment world, I think, have got their own language, which is different from the pensions language as well. And anything that we can do to try to break down those barriers should be done. I think there's a lot of good work being done, and I've seen a number of different dictionaries and so on with glossaries of terms produced by various people. At the moment, they haven't sort of locked together. Lots of people are producing their own things. We need to try to bring those together with some degree of consistency. But we're going in the right direction. We're making progress. So I think those are areas where we need to focus. And then I think we need to also focus on actually thinking about the practical help that we can give to people. If we're going to give them access to DC schemes, and by their very nature, we're going to ask them to take decisions, complex decisions about investment and long-term investment ideas and so on. I think we need to give them a little more help than we give them at the moment. And I think that, therefore, there is a strong need for more sophisticated default funds, because I think at the end of the day, a lot of people will still go for a default fund. They will opt out of taking a decision. They will find it just too difficult. So if we can be a bit more sophisticated about default funds, breaking people down into categories and groups that are ever smaller, if you like, you're going to get closer to the ideal, which would be that the person's got a complete understanding of what's going on and will take the right decisions for themselves.
Well, I think that's a very good point. Understanding your audience is something that communicators tell you is the basic mantra. But we do need to get away from the idea that defaults are something that could be sold across the country, almost as a default offering to the industry, and to be more tailored. But
yes, in the early days that was fine, because in the absence of anything else, a default fund was better than nothing. But now I think we've moved on, and we need to be more sophisticated, and we need to have more than one default fund. And if that means producing a white labelled default fund, if you like, that gives the trustee or the manager of the pension scheme the ability to move people's assets to reflect the fact they've moved from subdivision A1 into subdivision B3 or something, then they can do that without actually having to involve the member again. And that's a much closer to sort of managing the outcome for the member in hopefully a way that produces an outcome that meets their expectations.
Well, as you may have gathered from conversations we've gone along, I'm a great believer in the trust-based approach, because trustees looking after people who aren't capable, in the nicest way, of looking after themselves, it's something that over the years we all grew up with as an essential part of pensions governance. But do you think that there are enough trustees who have the acumen in DC and more modern savings methods to actually do a good job in looking after the interests of their members?
It's a difficult one. I think they're in short supply, certainly. I think we need to also consider whether we actually do need every single trustee on a trustee board to have the same level of knowledge and acumen in every particular area. So I think as long as you've got, my own opinion is that if you've got one or two people, trustees on the board, who are experts in, say, the field of investment, then as long as the others can understand what those expert trustees have come up with and are proposing and so on, then I think that is sufficient. I don't think you need to have every trustee board staffed by people who are experts in every particular aspect of running the pension scheme. But also, of course, if we're going for simpler designs as well, we can help to actually reduce the load on trustees and what we're asking them to do. So I think there's a role to play in that as well. I think the things all sort of fit together in sort of jigsaw, if you like.
Well, spoken as the president of the Society of Pension Consultants. Absolutely right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Kevin, for coming and talking to us today. Some very cogent words of wisdom here,
My pleasure.
which I hope our members will appreciate. And when you watch this video, if you are so driven, I hope you'll comment in the usual way by posting on the community, and I will ensure that your comments come back to Kevin. And of course, if you want a reply, we'll arrange one for you. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Thank you very much indeed for coming, Kevin.
Thank you.
Goodbye.